Divine Mother, sorry, there's recording in progress interfering with the prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, Babaji Krishna, Jesus Christ, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, my beloved Gurudev Paramhansa Yogananda, beloved friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda, saints and sages of all religions, I humbly bow to you all. Thank you for raising the vibration of this class. Thank you for connecting us to our highest selves. Om Shanti Shanti. So whether you can hear it or not, I will chant, and I promise by next class I will do something about it. Jai Guru Jai, Guru Jai, Guru Jai. Jai Guru Jai, Guru Jai, Guru Jai. Paramhansa Yogananda, Jai Guru Jai. Paramhansa Yogananda, Jai Guru Jai. Jai Guru Jai, Guru Jai, Guru Jai. Jai Guru Jai, Guru Jai, Guru Jai. Paramhansa Yogananda, Jai Guru Jai. Paramhansa Yogananda, Jai Guru Jai. Jai Guru Jai, Guru Jai, Guru Jai. Jai Guru Jai, Guru Jai, Guru Jai. Paramhansa Yogananda, Jai Guru Jai. Paramhansa Yogananda, Jai Guru Jai. Jai Guru Jai, Guru Jai, Guru Jai. Paramhansa Yogananda, Jai Guru Jai. So we continue with our reading of the Gita. In this version, it is page 199, Anurupa is telling me. And I believe I explained some stuff, but I did not read it. So we'll just recall that. So it starts with explanation of the sloka 429. One practice of yoga offers the incoming breath, which is prana, into the outgoing breath, which is apana, and the apana into the prana, thereby through pranayam, control of the energy, rendering the breath unnecessary. So in this, in Gita, actually, Krishna keeps talking about the Kriya Yoga that we are practicing today. So it is talking about the pranayam practice where we are learning how to control the energy. So we take in the prana or oxygen and we release the apana. which is carbon dioxide. And once we start focusing on the breath, you see, meditation is all about developing your concentration. Unless we know how to concentrate, the mind will not calm down. It is impossible to meditate unless you learn how to concentrate. So how do we learn how to concentrate? We start focusing on the incoming breath and the outgoing breath. Incoming breath and the outgoing breath. And what happens when we start focusing like this? Because we have given our mind a positive thing to focus on, the other mind chatter starts going down. Anytime you focus very deeply to do something, you will see as if the rest of the world ceases to exist. That's because we are concentrated on one point. So that is what we are aiming at by the practice of pranayam. It is only once we have mastered this ability to concentrate will real meditation happen, right? So once we start focusing on it, what is happening then? The entire body is starting to fill with prana or life force energy or life-tron, as Master used to call them, life-trons, which is oxygen. As the brain is getting oxygenated, carbon dioxide is getting dispelled. Mind chatter causes carbon dioxide in the system. So when we bring in more and more of oxygen or prana, carbon dioxide gets dispelled because of our focus on the breath. Mind chatter dies down. So the function of the heart becomes redundant. What does the heart do continuously throughout every second of our lives? It is pumping in oxygen. It is releasing the carbon dioxide through the blood circulation system. It is sending oxygen to all areas of the body, and through the veins, the venous system, it releases the carbon dioxide, right? So that is the heart's primary function. Now, once we are bringing in more and more prana, the heart's function is not necessary anymore. So the heart can rest. When the heart can rest, the rest of the organs of the body are also at peace. The wear and tear on the organs of the body stops. And we learn how to live only on the prana. We know how to channel the oxygen or the life-tron through our energy body. We don't need the physical heart anymore. And that is why yogis can live for 300, 400 years, because the body does not decay, because the heart is at rest. So oftentimes, that is why it says breathlessness is deathlessness. We can go, we can access the infinite because our physical bodies and our mind and intellect are at rest. Then we can become one with the astral world through our energy bodies, okay? So breathlessness is deathlessness. When you breathe very few times in a minute, maybe 3 or 4 times in a minute, your lifespan automatically becomes much longer because of the lack of wear and tear of the body. So meditators start looking younger than their years, and they live much longer than the average person. Also, when sometimes we hear these magical stories that a yogi tells his disciples that dig me into the earth, under the ground, I am going to go in for a long samadhi. I don't want anybody disturbing my body. You can dig me out after 5 years or 10 years. So after 5 or 10 years, when the disciples dig him out, he is hale and hearty. Medically, technically, there is no heartbeat. And he is technically dead, but he's not, because he knows how to channel the prana. And this is how you have 1,000-year-old yogis in a cave. They are simply finishing maybe 50 lifetimes of karmic evolution in one body. They don't want to die, go back, now again waste time growing up, becoming a baby, learning to walk, learning to talk, then coming to meditation. So they want to finish all their karmas at one go and finally depart when the time is ready. So that is the meaning of, breathlessness is deathlessness. So through pranayam or control of the energy, we render the breath unnecessary.
Urmi, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard Jamuna.
Oh, Jamuna, yes.
Yeah, I heard that when we come into the earth, we have predetermined number of breaths. So when you're doing pranayama and all these other things, it slows down your breath, so your lifespan is longer. So my question is it true that we come with predetermined number of breaths?
Yes, yes. So suppose you came with 80 or whatever, do the maths, a certain number of breaths. Now, if you are like a dog and you have breathed so hard and fast because you are a stressed out individual, you are 80 breaths per minute, you are not going to live very long. Calm people live longer. And so that amount of breaths with which you have come, now instead of lasting 80 years, will probably last you 200 years. You're simply stretching the gaps between the breaths when you're doing pranayam, and that is how your lifespan increases.
Okay,
right? Yeah. So that is how, because we are breathing less times in a minute, that is how the lifespan, but the number of breaths remain the number of breaths, whatever you have come with. But you can stretch it to a huge degree. So if you count your breaths, the normal, unstressed, calm person will probably breathe about 12 to 15 breaths per minute. You can try it out as a exercise for yourself. Now, when you start meditating, over the years, you will see that 15 to 12 breaths has gone down to 9 or 10 naturally. When that happens, you will see that you are able to communicate with animals. Animals are very close to you because they come to you because there's no stress or fear in you. An animal will come towards you only if you don't have any fear, because the fear triggers them. Then they will start barking or biting or whatever. So when you lower it, you can also tame wild beasts. I saw a documentary of some monks in Tibet. They play with large tigers, full-grown tigers, which are as gentle as pussycats with those monks. If you lower your breath further to about 6 or 7 breaths per minute, you will be able to speak to plants. There are some people who can talk to plants and make them flower. If you lower it even further to 2 or 3 breaths per minute, you will be able to communicate with minerals, with crystals, with anything that has that soul energy. Even below that, you bring down 1 breath per minute, you will be able to control the force fields in the universe. There are many force fields moving, of which we are not even aware because we are so restless. So the quieter you get, the mysteries of the universe start unraveling themselves to you. And therefore, when people meditate, they have many so-called miraculous powers. The point is, everybody is capable of developing that. You just need to calm down your intellect. You need to activate your intuition, right? And that is not possible if there is too much mind chatter.
Me one more quick one. What about babies?
Babies what?
Like random babies, who do they get attracted with people who have lower
Of
breath?
course, babies and animals, they are only responding to your energy system. They are like animals in that sense. They sense your energy, your aura. They are not intellectual. They don't understand what you're saying. But you will see babies will start howling if they see some people, and they will happily go to others. So it is because of the energy you are emitting. If it is a peaceful energy, if it is a loving energy, a baby will never mistake a person, even a dog. They know what is in your mind. So if a dog is backing off, if a baby is crying, when it sees you, you know that either you have something in your space which you need to remove, or you know that you have to calm down. They only sense energies. They are not bothered what you look like, whether you're smiling, whether what you're saying. They are only sensing energies. The physical breath, as we saw earlier, accompanies the upward and downward flow of energy through the Ida and Pingala nadis in the spine. I explained that there are three main channels in the energy body. The Ida, which is on the left side, controlling the right brain. The Pingala, which is on the right side, controlling the left brain. And the Shushumna nadi, which is right in the center. What are we trying to do with all this meditative exercises? We are trying to bring in all our energies into the Shushumna. Once it is in the central channel, then the Kundalini will start rising. Then you are in your authentic power as a human being. Otherwise, your energy is scattered everywhere. So the more we withdraw our energies within, then we start actually activating our true power, which all the while is coiled at the base of the spine. Once all the energy has come into the Shushumna, that force will pull up the Kundalini force. So, and all the chakras will get activated, and that is what gives us miraculous powers. Indeed, it is this spinal flow of the energies known as prana and apana, which prompts the lungs to inhale and exhale. Actually, prana also, more broadly speaking, means energy itself. Prana is para prakriti as opposed to apara prakriti, which is nature. Basically, it is immanent as opposed to overt nature, the hidden reality behind the whole material universe. So when we start to study energy, then we realize that behind the veil is a whole different story which we don't even realize exists. The slow, careful, conscious circulation. Yeah.
1 second. I didn't understand this when you said what is overt nature?
Overt nature is what you see in front of you. Covert nature is what is happening in the energy world behind you. The physical world and the energy world, basically.
Okay.
The slow, careful, conscious circulation of energy around the spine constitutes the ancient science known as Kriya Yoga. This circulation magnetizes the spine and redirects the mental tendencies called samskaras towards the brain in a way interestingly reminiscent of the realigning of molecules in a north-south direction in a bar of steel. In the last class, I have explained this in detail, so I'm not going to go into it. Basically, this practice of Kriya Yoga will align all your molecules in the spine in a south to north direction. And when all your energies are aligned in one direction only, that is when you are able to exercise tremendous power over your environment, over your circumstance. Because inside you are an integrated person. It's not that 80% of you is wanting something and 20% is saying no and is a split of part of you and going in a different direction. So meditation or Kriya Yoga is teaching you to be 100% present at all times. And when you, and whatever you do, you are giving 100% of your energies too, because you have also learned to concentrate. So when you do that, whatever work you do will take quarter of the time, and therefore your productivity will go up massively. People will ask, how on earth do you have energy to do so many things? That's because you are more or less present in your body at all times. Whatever you do gets 100% energy. Because it gets 100% energy, you accomplish that task in half the time it would take a normal person to do it. And therefore, you are very, very productive. So when you see very successful businessmen or very successful even spiritual leaders, the kind of energy they have, they don't need to sleep. They will sleep for 3 hours or barely because they don't need the sleep. And the rest of the time, the amount of work that they will do is phenomenal because of the energy they are channeling, right? And they never seem to grow tired. They are always cheerful. Their energies are, absolutely balanced, and they are all there. When a spiritual leader will look at you, the gaze is direct and it is a burning gaze. There is a lot of intensity in that person because they live life to the full. They are not vague, half here, half there, half asleep, not interested, bored. No, they will give you 100% of their attention if you're talking to them. Maybe for 5 minutes, but in that 5 minutes, they will have assessed you like they would have over a 5-hour conversation with you. And they will know all about you because they are fully present for you in that 5 minutes. And that's why they can deal with so many people. That's why they can do so much work. So this circulation magnetizes the spine. So when the spine, I said in the last class, the material world is governed by 2 kinds of energies, electrical energy and magnetic energy. Electrical energy governs our thoughts. Magnetic energy governs our feelings. Feelings are more powerful than thought. A true feeling, not emotion. Huh? The true feeling. That's why we say that if you want to manifest something, sure, please give yourself affirmation, but remember how it will make you feel if that dream came true. If you are not able to connect to the authentic feeling, your manifestation will take a long time. It will not come. When you want it, may not come at all because you're using only your brain capacity. You need to use your heart capacity, which is the home of magnetism, okay? So when all the molecules in our astral spine are moving in one direction and upwards towards the higher chakras, our aura starts to grow bigger and bigger. Powerful aura, and it magnetizes. One thought of yours will immediately bring what you want. So you become a very, very powerful manifester. Whatever your dreams and hopes are always get fulfilled. So, and your journey through life becomes very, very smooth. So that is what is known as a magnetic personality. You attract through the sheer presence in your body and that powerful aura. Similar to the bar magnet, the spine becomes magnetized in the sense that the energy flowing ever more unidirectionally towards the brain is drawn into the deep spine, the Sushumna, where with the awakening of the Kundalini, it rises through the chakras, lifting all one's energy and consciousness upward towards God. Thus, the energy is brought to the spiritual eye, finally to become united with Sahasrara, the 1,000-petal lotus at the top of the head. So the crown chakra is known as the 1,000-petal lotus. It is our direct connection. It is right on top of the head. It is our direct connection to source. So when we are able to open that chakra, we are always connected to source, and that source energy flows through us. We can channel that. That this yoga was taught not only in recent times in the late 1800s, but anciently is evidenced by this stanza and also by a later one in chapter 5 of the Gita, where Krishna describes the need for neutralizing the currents of prana and apana. So neutralizing means when you come together, you are no longer flowing, prana is no longer flowing in Ida, apana is no longer flowing downwards and outwards through Pingala. Both have come into the Sushumna. So it is neutralized, the up and down and the breathing movement or the need. There you are simply able to channel the energy. What? So what are we doing, Richa? Richa is asking, coming into Sushumna means what? So I'll just explain. Okay, so as I said, this is the astral spine. Okay. Now, the invisible nadis or energy channels, the main energy channel is the Sushumna Nadi, going straight up to the 1,000-petal lotus, which is the crown chakra. We have two other important energy channels. One is the Ida. Say this is my right brain. The Ida feeds the right brain but controls the left side of the body. It will move around this energy channel like this down the spine. The Pingala controls the left brain but the right side of the body. So it will come, they are crisscrossing, okay? Now, through all this, we are still divided into masculine and feminine. Ida is our feminine energy or receptive energy. Pingala is our masculine energy or outwardly directed energy, doing energy. In all of us, masculine and feminine both is there, right? Now, through the practice of meditation, when we are pulling the Kriya breath, what is happening from outside, all the energy from the outside world, we are bringing it here and the energy is flowing powerfully in, so it is coming together. So it is neutralizing our feminine and masculine. So now our power, see, as a soul, we sometimes get born as women and we sometimes get born as men, but ultimately the soul has no gender. So when we bring both masculine and feminine here, okay, so now imagine your logical side, your practical side, and your intuitive side, your imaginative side, your receptive side are completely balanced, awake, and moving up the Sushumna. So as a person, you become very, very powerful. You are neither, like women tend to be say, I'm not generalizing, but usually what do we say of women? Oh, you're so emotional, you're weak, da, da, da. And men, we say, not for all, men have a lot of ego, they have a lot of pride, it is difficult for them to be flexible. So whatever it is, so those energies start getting neutralized. So you start to understand your soul nature. So as we grow spiritually, you will see this obsession with gender goes. You understand that everybody is a soul and you are only interested in realizing your highest potential as a human being. Sincere aspirants often wonder if Kriya Yoga is such an exalted science, why has it not been published in book form so that all might learn it? A reasonable question, certainly. The masters themselves, however, have said it should not be published precisely because it is a teaching that transcends reason itself. Right understanding of it depends on the unfolding intuition. So if I explain to you the practice, you will say, oh, that's it. But when you really start practicing it, you will be astounded at the depth and the layers that it can go to. On the face of it, it seems, oh yeah, sure, I'll watch my breath, or oh yeah, I'll do the Kriya breath, I'll go up and down. But it is only through deep meditation that you can actually understand the depth of the practice. And that really cannot be explained in a book. It is experiential, it is vibrational. And because it is such a precious practice, it is not just, easily available. You really have to want to understand it. It's not just, okay, fine, I'll just go and learn it. Now, when anything is very easily available, we don't even realize how much we need to evolve to even desire to practice it, right? So it's like, as I was saying, that if we want to learn painting, or if we want to learn how to run a business, right? We want to go to the best painter, or we want to go to the best business school. But the entry to that business school, and whether that brilliant painter will even consider you as a student, you need to be of a certain caliber to be able to access something this deep and this profound. So therefore, it is not readily available. You really have to want to come to a class. You have to want to commit that time and that energy to be able to do it. You have to have that discipline. So just by reading a book, it is not even possible. So why then write it in a book? It just becomes very, very cheap. So anyone who really wants to understand the secrets of the universe, anyone who really wants to, realize their highest potential, is a certain kind of person. And it comes over lifetimes of evolution to even want to do such a thing. That there is a whole universe behind the material world as we see it. When we start to understand the enormity of it, then we really want to practice this, okay? So the masters themselves, however, have said it should not be published precisely because it is a teaching that transcends reason itself. Because with it, you are going to go beyond the intellect. You are going to go into intuition. You are going to go into your highest powers, right? So you really, language is a very left brain activity. Language is very limited in being able to explain certain things. Those can only be felt and experienced. You won't be able to write about it. So most people who have had spiritual experiences, they will say, experience it for yourself. Language is not fine enough or deep enough to even be able to catch that. Okay. So Kriya Yoga, in order to be wholly effective, must be received not only intellectually, that is in written or spoken form, but vibrationally. That's why it cannot be published in a book. It needs to be received vibrationally in the form of initiation. So while you can learn the basics of meditation and concentration, the moment you are wanting to go deeper into it and to really practice the Kriya breath, then there is a barrier. You have to prove yourself of a certain caliber to be able to receive that initiation, which comes as a vibrational transmission from the gurus through the line of, people who are ordained to pass on this energy to you. So, but it needs to be taken in vibrationally. A magnet is created either by electrical realignment of the molecules or by close proximity to another magnet. So if you keep the right company, if you meditate together with people who have been meditating for 30, 40 years, automatically it's like an osmosis. Vibrationally, you pick up that energy also. Attunement with a God-awakened guru influences the samskaras comparable to the material molecules to flow upward to the brain. So samskaras are basically all those karmic tendencies which we are still carrying in our chakras. So when through discipleship, through the Kriya Yoga initiation, what happens? We are formally attuned to this line of masters. So an energy channel gets created between you and the masters. And then you attune to them. Attune means become vibrationally aligned to a certain ray which is moving from the source to the earth. There are many such rays, and all the rays, different religions, different spiritual masters, different spiritual lineages, but they are specific rays, but all of them will ultimately take you to source. But being connected or being attuned to a ray becomes very, very important. Otherwise, your spiritual growth is haphazard. You are doing it on your own. The path is also dangerous. You may, start creating wrong karma unless there is a guide or a guru and a consistent body of teaching which will take you forward on the path. We are dealing here with a reality subtler and much more difficult to master than mere metallic molecules. Without an experienced guide, even mountain climbing can be fatal, though death in this case only ends a single incarnation. Spiritual mistakes can be costlier in terms of long-range suffering. So we may not know what is a spiritual mistake, how to avoid it. So through the Gita, Krishna is actually explaining to Arjuna how to be a yogi so that he moves fast on the spiritual path and doesn't get derailed at every crossroad, because there will be many choices and there will be many consequences, and people can get derailed if they don't have a guru that guides them. Guidance from the guru is not only helpful, it is essential. This does not mean that Kriya Yoga is dangerous. Far from it. But to take up Kriya Yoga signifies entering seriously onto the path to God. It is not a game and should certainly be treated as a lifetime commitment. To treat it lightly is certainly, we should add, not the best of karma. Kriya Yoga initiation was formally given only to sannyasins, that is, renunciates. People who have said, now I'm done with the world. I don't need a family. I don't need money. I am a hermit. And my only reason for existence is to realize my God self. So initially, you had to become a sannyasin. You had to become a monk to be able to even receive that initiation. So it was given only to sannyasins whose lives were already vowed to the divine search. This restriction was lifted by Babaji when he gave this sacred initiation to Lahiri Mahashaya. The inward reason for his relaxing the ancient prescriptions was that the earth had already entered into a new age, Dwapar Yuga, when mankind was becoming more conscious of energy. Humanity as a whole was becoming more receptive to a teaching that focused on the body's energy. Nevertheless, any yoga initiation, and especially into the ancient science of Kriya Yoga, should be looked upon as a very sacred step in one's life. So because it is the ascending energy age, Babaji allowed Lahiri Mahashaya to give the initiation to normal people like us, like householders, because mass consciousness had shifted. Humanity as a whole is getting more and more evolved. Say, what are the things of mass evolution? For example, formerly when somebody committed a murder, we would happily hang him. Now what do? We don't hang the person, we send him for psychological counseling and we try to rehabilitate that person into society. So the death of the death sentence itself says that we are not anymore a society which is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, or whatever the saying is. We are far more compassionate. We are able to see behind the reasons why somebody would become a murderer in the first place. And we believe that all souls can be redeemed. So humanity, the way we look at things keeps changing. And as we move into the energy age, we are realizing that a whole universe is there behind the material reality. And we are able to understand that. And therefore, even normal people who have not vowed to give up their material life, they can practice Kriya and can move, forward on their spiritual path while doing their everyday householder duties. Because the capacity to understand, the consciousness has evolved over lifetimes. Our consciousness is evolving, right? Say if we were crystals first, then plants, then animals, then humans, then evolved humans, then ascended masters. It is an evolution of humanity which is happening. Okay. So Kriya Yoga, initiation into Kriya Yoga should be looked upon as a very sacred step in one's life. Spiritual progress without the help of a true or Satguru cannot but be slow, haphazard, uncertain, and sometimes dangerous. The ancient tradition in India, where spirituality has been studied for thousands of years, not as a religion, but as a practical science, practical in the sense of results actually accomplished, has always insisted that a true guru is the sine qua non for success on the spiritual path. Many spiritually ignorant people, even in India, insist that with literacy as widespread as it is now, and with books so easily available, spiritual teachings are accessible to virtually everyone, and a guru is no longer needed. Truly, widespread literacy has had one unfortunate effect: the dissemination not only of knowledge, but also of ignorance. So more than knowledge, ignorance is also being spread. True understanding comes not by intellectual reasoning, but by intuition. Inner intuitive attunement with the consciousness of the Guru is what most surely and directly brings spiritual awakening. Has not everybody experienced in the presence of certain people a greater feeling of peace, harmony, and upliftment? If relatively ordinary people can affect one in this way, how much greater must be the effect of one who is himself spiritually enlightened? In the Christian New Testament, it is written of Jesus Christ, as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. That is exactly what everyone needs, the power to rise. Such power cannot be self-generated. To those that received him, we have to be open. What is the meaning of being open? It means that we have to lower our ego selves enough to be able to receive what a higher power can bring us. If we are still in the grip of ego, we will say these people are human beings. Why should I bow down to another human being? I am intelligent. I can take charge of my life. I can do whatever I need to do. But if you go through life, you will see some things you cannot control. You cannot control life and death. Some things just keep happening. So if in the grip of ego, you say that I don't need a guru, it's like saying I want to be a brilliant painter, but I will learn it on my own and I don't need a teacher. It's like saying that I want to be a brilliant scientist, but I will not go to any school and I will not choose the school wisely. It's like that. I want to climb the top of a mountain. I have never even climbed a small hill, but I don't need a guide. I'll go on my own. On the mountain, there are so many dangers. You don't even know how to navigate. So that is why a guru or an enlightened master is necessary on the spiritual path. And as we are talking of energy, it is not necessary for the guru to be physically present or alive. Energetically, we can tune into him. They are as powerfully present as energies if only we know, if we learn how to attune ourselves to those energies. So Christ says in the New Testament, it is said of Christ, as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. So you have to be open. Your Ida or your feminine, see, when it's our relationship with God, we are all feminine. We have to activate the feminine side of us, which is the receptive side. Only when we are open and receptive and capable of surrender can the grace come down to us. Otherwise, we will just be pushing it away. We have to be open. We have to be humble. We have to lower our egos. Only then can that grace flow in. Such power cannot be The ego, as we saw earlier, is already infected with the very disease that is ignorance. It wants to banish from its consciousness. Only one who has himself escaped the clutches of ego consciousness can, with his expanded consciousness, infuse into the disciples' awareness new insight, new understanding, and new power to rise spiritually. So like we say now that you cannot solve a problem from the level where it was created. You have to move above. You have to get the big picture. You have to take a little distance. With that same consciousness that created the problem, we cannot hope to resolve that problem. We have to shift our consciousness. We have to move up and look at the problem from a different perspective. So that perspective, that new understanding comes from the Guru. Were such a sacred science as Kriya Yoga to be shouted from the housetops, as Ramanuja shouted the sacred mantra Om Namo Narayana from the roof of a temple, there is a story of Ramanuja, it would lack an essential ingredient of success. In all Indian tradition, initiation into the spiritual mysteries by a true guru is considered more important than the teachings themselves. Okay, so no matter how many books you have read, how many practices you have mastered, what happens is unless you are aligned vibrationally with a true guru, all that does not activate. So that is more important than all your intellectual learnings. Ramanuja's love and compassion for mankind notwithstanding, his guru had been right when he enjoined secrecy on him. So Ramanuja's guru had taught him the spiritual principles and the spiritual method. And Ramanuja, in his guru had given him a secret mantra. And Ramanuja wanted to share it with everybody because he felt compassion for the whole of humanity. And so he's shouting the sacred mantra from the rooftop. Okay. So his guru had been right when he enjoined secrecy on him. Perhaps Ramanuja had the spiritual power thus to initiate so many, as Sri Chaitanya centuries later inspired thousands with Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In Chaitanya's presence, indeed, thousands were inspired, as by no means all are, who chant that mantra in the streets exuberantly in modern times. So just chanting the mantra without the vibrational alignment to the Guru is not going to get you anything, because that vibration really opens up our energies. That vibration is of the utmost importance. These are not mere words. When you chant normally, say Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, and when you chant with deep devotion, the words have completely different effects. So it depends on how elevated your own consciousness is, that a mantra will work for you. So in the ancient times, the gurus used to give particular mantras to particular disciples because they understood what will benefit that disciple according to his level of consciousness. The tradition is that mantra diksha, or initiation into a mantra, should be spoken into the right ear and conveyed, not only uttered, with spiritual power. Kriya Yoga Diksha. So even, I am a Reiki master and we have an initiation process. And I know why that is sacred. It is vibrationally you are transmitting that energy to a student. Anyone can see these days, the symbols are all over the internet. Anybody can access it. But to give them that power to activate the symbol in the right way, it needs to be transmitted from the main Reiki, Usui Reiki, suppose it's a lineage. So everyone who is a teacher is initiated into that. So not everybody can give that initiation because it's a complete vibrational transmission coming from the origin, from source. So similarly, mantra diksha is given in the right ear, and it is just not uttered, it is actually bringing in spiritual power to you. Kriya Yoga Diksha is much subtler than Mantra Diksha. It involves not only that which can be spoken with the tongue or uttered mentally, but involves also an awareness in the spine. So when we get initiated into Kriya Yoga, that energy transmission happens. It's very, very subtle, okay? Which must come from inside. This is why attunement with the Guru is so essential, particularly with Kriya practice. One should invite the Guru's consciousness to awaken one's own energy within the spine. Why do we have Kriya preparation classes for 9 months, almost a year before we actually receive Kriya initiation? There are 4 levels which carry on for 9 whole months to prepare the student's body, mind, and spirit to be able to receive the initiation when it comes at the end of 9 months. Okay. One should invite the Guru's consciousness to awaken one's own energy within the spine. This can be accomplished only by mental, intuitive attunement with the Guru, by receiving him, as it says in the Bible, deeply into oneself. So these are very, very subtle things, and only when you experience it, when you go deep into yourself, can you actually understand the depth of what I'm reading. These are not just words, okay? How can one attune himself with the Guru? One method is to gaze deeply into his eyes. A mere photograph will do, and visualize him at the point between the eyebrows, to call to him deeply. Introduce me to God. Now, call to him, the key word here is deeply. So it is up to you how much you want to connect. How much is the desire inside you to connect to God? So, and then once you ask the Guru, introduce me to God, then listen or feel in the heart. The heart is the radio station in the body where the divine presence is received and where the Guru's blessings and powers are intuitively perceived. Can this blessing be perceived from a distance? Can it be received after the Guru has left the physical plane? The answer, as my Guru himself told me in specific terms, is that one needs at least one physical contact with him. That contact can be transmitted through a direct line of disciples of a true Guru. If he is a world savior like Yogananda, it is both right and fitting that those who come after him give initiation in his name. Thus, subsequent generations of disciples will always refer back to the supreme power of that savior and avatar for their ultimate blessing. Students who have claimed discipleship to a great master without having had at least one outer contact show by their very auras that they have not received the same blessing in their lives as those who have honored this timeless principle. So in any spiritual tradition, it is better, first of all, if you are going to a guru and you are serious about the spiritual quest, to find a genuine line of powerful masters. So the lineage with which you align yourself has to be solid, has to be of a very great standing and depth. not just anyone who, sprouts up and says, I am a guru. And if the lineage is deep and strong, that channel of energy is very, very strong as well. Okay. So I think we can stop today. It is 5 o'clock and we will continue in next Sunday. And thank you for being here. We end with a prayer. Okay. Divine Mother, thou art omnipresent. Thou art in all thy children. Manifest thy healing power in all bodies, minds, and souls. Please rub your hands together, bring up the energy, and chant Om with me 3 times and send out that energy to anybody you feel who is in need of healing. Om. 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So see you